Ladies and gentlemen, we're back at it again with more Wuthering Waves content for version 2.8, and this time it's going to be on not the new character, but the new weapon that's coming out. Yes, we've gotten the full reveal of Kumikiri, the Broadblade. That's, well, the best in slot for Chisa. And we'll be talking a bit with some information on her kit, because we've got the full kit reveal as well, about how actually useful this weapon is. Because, ladies and gentlemen, weapons in Wuthering Waves are one of the biggest investments that you can make. You're spending upwards of 60 to 65, maybe even 70 plus pulls to acquire one of these. So likely you want to pull a weapon that's going to be a big improvement to your account, because it's a big investment to make. And maybe it'll be a weapon that can be used on multiple characters, because that's something that this game allows too. So yeah, we'll be going into the value and whether or not it's worth your ass right. So without further ado, let's get right on into it. But before we begin, if you're looking to pick up Chisa, her weapon, or the existing Wuthering Waves 2.7 banners and are thinking about purchasing some lunite, you'd probably like to save some cash.
LD Shop is a fantastic way of doing that, and I'll show you exactly why. LDshop.gg gives you access to huge discounts on pretty much anything you can buy in a ton of games. But let's click on Woowa for now. The monthly pass? Usually it's $5 dues, but on LD Shop, it'll be much less. What a deal! To claim one of these discounts, just select the item you're looking for and click Top Up to submit your payment. You'll need your Kuro linked account email, password, and username. This might seem a bit off, but remember that LD Shop already works with sensitive account information with their emulator, LD Player, so you can trust them for their services. They also have excellent reviews on Trustpilot. If you created an account with Gmail or Facebook, use the directions in the top-up menu to link your account to an email. After finalizing your payment info, wait a couple of minutes and your items will be on your account. New users can get a 10% discount and an additional 5% using my sponsored link, and first-time top-up bonuses are available as well. That means you can get some big discounts. Spending $80 or more will net you a VIP membership, which can get you a free 30-day lunite subscription. So try LD Shop today.
Alrighty, so first things first, we're going to take a look at the Broadblade, and as you can see, this is essentially just one half of the big-ass scissors that Chisa carries. It looks basically identical to what her actual weapon is. So this might be one of the most faithful representations because, well, let's just be entirely honest over here, right? I'll just give you an example of a character that doesn't fucking do that. This bitch? Like, she don't, like, that's not her weapon. This is her weapon. But, like, she uses this shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, I don't think I need to, like, go too much further with this one. You guys probably already understand what's going on over here. Yeah, that's just one example. So now, kind of like moving a little bit forward, let's take a look at Kumikiri. A crimson thread emerges. I don't care about this shit. All right, let's just talk a little bit about this weapon stats, because, well, it's got a pretty unique blend of stats over here. It's going to be a Broadblade that actually has 500 base attack and a crit rate of 36%. Yes, it's got one of those breakdowns. And so the first thing that we have to talk about whenever it comes to judging a weapon is actually its base stats, because base stats are really important. When it comes to weapons, Kuro likes to do a bit of a blend with how they do their base stats. This is an example of a weapon that's on the opposite end of Kumikiri. Kumikiri has very, very high critical stats, but low base attack. That means that building the character is going to be a lot easier, but the ceiling of the unit is actually a little bit lower, because when you have a lower base attack weapon, any percentage attack buffs in the game simply apply less to your character. On the flip side, having a higher base attack weapon means that those same percentage attack buffs are actually more impactful to your scaling, because every single one of those percentage stat buffs in the game, ladies and gentlemen, they scale off of this attack over here. And unfortunately, when you take your weapon off and then replace it with something else, like I'm doing over here, well, you can see that that base attack goes down, and all those percentage attack buffs that you have across your character are doing a lot less for you. So that's something to keep in mind. So this weapon over here, lower base attack in general, but a much higher critical stat. And once again, like I said before, this makes the critical ratio a lot easier to blend, but you won't maybe deal as much damage as you potentially could be had it had a higher base attack. So that's what it's going to be looking like over there for the base stats. Next thing that we're going to be focusing on over here is going to be none other than the weapon skill. So let's start talking a little bit about that one. All right. So the weapon skill is going to be called Life Thread, and we're going to be looking at it from synchronization rank 1 and not much further beyond that. So the baseline skill is going to be attack is increased by 12%. So first things first, the way that I judge skills in this game is that attack has traditionally been the baseline for every character. And when you have an attack effect over here, typically the weapon's skill is a bit stronger because there are other weapons in the game, and I'll just use Jinxi's as an example. There are other weapons in the game that give a 12% attribute damage bonus instead of attack, and these typically have weaker weapon skills to offset the fact that a 12% attribute damage bonus is typically better than a 12% attack one. You'll see this type of blend on a lot of the earlier weapons that were released in the game, but a lot of the newer ones that have come out are instead going with attack. And as you can probably imagine, this means that the bonus that they have on this is likely going to be a bit stronger. So let's keep reading. When the wielder casts an intro skill or inflicts negative statuses, they gain an 8% liberation damage bonus, stacking up to 3 times for 15 seconds. So at a baseline, Chisa can max this out almost immediately, very easily. Because Chisa, of course, because she's a character, she has an intro skill, so that's 1 stack over there. And she regularly inflicts negative statuses with her kit, basically primarily through using her resonance skill, marking targets, and whenever the marked targets take damage, she inflicts Havoc Bane on them. That's just something that she has. It works very well in her kit. She has constant application of it and can basically maintain full uptime on this effect. So that's going to be 24% liberation damage bonus over there. That's kind of dog shit for a weapon. But that's not the only effect that she has. At max stacks, when resonators in the team inflict negative statuses, they gain a 24% all attribute damage bonus for 15 seconds. And effects of the same name cannot be stacked. So first things first, there's a couple things that I have to say about this. A, this is a very specific buff. There are going to be a lot of teams in the game where this buff literally does not exist and it does not do anything for any person other than Chisa. Because this is a 24% all attribute damage buff that you'll get if you're able to inflict negative statuses. And that's the key word. There are only like 3 characters in the game that can get that 24% attribute damage buff. Let me list them out for you. You got Spectro Rover, who's able to get it. I think Arrow Rover can too if they convert Havoc Bane into Erosion. Then you have Phoebe, who applies Spectro Frazzle. So I guess that's 3 characters. And then you got Cartithia, who can apply Erosion, so that's 4. And then Chacona for 5. That's it. There's 5 characters in the game that can get that 24% attribute damage buff, because guess what, guys? Zani doesn't actually inflict negative statuses. She deals negative status damage, but she doesn't actually inflict negative statuses. So, based off the wording that's in here, only the appliers can get the buff, and Zani herself can't. Because this is the realization, ladies and gentlemen. And there's a bit of a wording inconsistency over here. And what I'm praying is that the wording of this gets adjusted later on, because you'll see Chisa has very specific wording in her outro skill that allows all of her buffs to work with Zani. And this is the specific wording on her outro skill that makes a big difference over here. Let me show you. You can see that her kit is fucking long. This is the wording on her outro skill. Inflicting negative statuses or dealing negative status damage grants Thread of Bane. It would probably make a lot more sense if that similar wording was here, where if they inflict negative statuses or deal negative status damage, they gain the 24%. That, to me, is something that makes a lot more sense and would make a lot more sense moving forward. Because one part about Zani's kit that we've been able to figure out as more and more TOA buffs, more and more specific negative status shilling has occurred, one thing that we've noticed is that Zani's helical embers don't actually count as a negative status. That's what we've noticed across all of the TOA resets that are focused on negative statuses. And so it actually converts Frazzle into like a technically non-negative status debuff. That's the Helical Embers. And the end result of that is that Zani oftentimes doesn't interact with the buffs or with like the anti-buffs that are focused around negative statuses. And so my take is that just for like wording consistency, it changes into, instead of just inflicting negative statuses, it's also inflicting negative status damage or dealing negative status damage, because that's what Zani does. she deals spectrofrazzle damage with her attacks, but she doesn't inflict spectrofrazzle. She inflicts helical embers, and helical embers don't count as a negative status for buff calculation and stuff like that. Maybe they'll just make a change where helical embers do count as a negative status, but no. Currently in the game, and currently based off of testing, that is not actually the case. Zani deals negative status damage, but doesn't actually inflict any debuffs. So that's just something to keep in mind. Clearly, Chisa's outro skill is worded and designed in a way to intentionally work with Zani, because all you need to do is deal negative status damage rather than inflict them, and that's exactly what Zani does. Her outro skill is worded in a way to apply it. However, on the other hand, it's becoming a lot more clear that that same sort of wording isn't showing up over here. So that would be my concern. It seems like a bit of a typo on this end, and hopefully it's something that gets changed or at least gets addressed and clarified prior to release, because I do think that Zani should be a team that actually gets this buff, because yes, I know it technically doesn't inflict frazzle, but it does mainly frazzle damage. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind if you're a potential Zani owner that's trying to make the team better. You're looking for a replacement for Shorekeeper or Havoc Rover. Yeah. So, now that we've gotten through some of my general concerns with Chisa's weapon, because I do think that there's a bit of an interesting design philosophy going on over here, I don't think it's like the worst thing ever to have a negative status specific weapon. This weapon actually reminds me a lot about Lupa's weapon, where she's got a special condition where she only buffs fusion characters on the team with 24% fusion damage. The reality is that having this weapon is nice for your fusion teams, but not having it isn't really that big of a deal. 24% damage isn't really like a large amount. It's a nice little bonus to have, but it's not something that makes or breaks your clears and like completely ruins your comps if you don't have it. And similarly, this 24% attribute damage bonus is like kind of the exact same thing. Instead of, you know, only applying to fusion characters, it's just only going to apply to characters that can inflict debuffs. So in a way, it's like similarly constrained, but I would just view this as a complete luxury. Just like how Lupa's weapon is a complete luxury, it makes the mono fusion teams slightly better. But once again, not having it isn't something that makes or breaks the performance of the teams. And I think it's going to be the same exact thing for Chisa's teams not having this weapon. Because guys, it's just a 24% attribute damage bonus. It's not like amplification. It's not like some crazy rare stat that you can only get like a little bit of, and it's not like attribute damage bonus is rare. This is less than what you get on the 3 cost, and this is essentially the same as like 3 echo rolls. That's kind of like what it is. It's the same as like 3 echo rolls on a character. Not really mandatory for a playstyle. And then when it comes to Chisa, right? Naturally, she's going to be able to gain a 48% resonance liberation damage bonus total from this. 24% from all attribute, and then 24% from up here. But guess what, guys? I don't think Chisa's dealing that much damage in the first place. And the only example that I need to show you of this is the fact that Chu Yan's weapon has some of the most disgusting damage buffs in the game. It gives a 60% heavy attack damage bonus. And even when this guy owns this thing and uses it in combat, he doesn't really deal that much damage as a sub DPS. So that's just something to think about as well. It's a previous sort of thing that we've had in the kit, and it actually gives less damage bonuses than characters like Chu Yan. However, I will say that she heals, so maybe if you're a healer, because Brant heals and is a sub DPS and he's broken. Yuno heals and she's a sub DPS and she's broken. Chisa heals and she's a sub DPS. Shit, she might be broken too. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm cautiously optimistic for her. But yeah, it's going to be good in her teams. She's only meant to be used in negative status teams anyways, because this Thread of Bane buff basically allows you to ignore 18% of the target's defense, which is huge. But you can only access this Thread of Bane buff if you apply or deal negative status damage. So she's kind of only meant for those teams, and I don't think she's going to be good outside of them. And all this weapon does is make that specialty a bit stronger, but it's already going to be strong at a baseline. So, yeah. All right, we've talked a little bit about this weapon and its use cases on Chisa. Why don't we talk about its use cases on other characters? There are none. It's a stat stick. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am pretty happy to say that there are no Broadblade characters in the game that even fucking apply debuffs. So, it is literally impossible for you to even gain access to the second part of this effect and stack this up more than one time unless you're playing Chisa. Like, literally, she's the only character in the game right now that's going to be able to access anything beyond 8% liberation damage. So that's what this weapon is. It's a 500 base attack, 36% crit rate, 12% attack bonus, and then 8% liberation damage bonus. That's what it is outside of using it on Chisa. And I think the only character in the game that I could feasibly see this weapon actually having any use case on, it's literally this fucking dude. Like, it's literally this fucking dude. That's it. He's the only one, because he'll get that little baby 8% damage bonus and then get a 500 base attack, 36% crit rate weapon. He's the only one that I feel like it's slightly usable on. But even in that context, you'd rather use Lupa's weapon on him anyways because it gives more Resonance Liberation damage bonus. So it's like, yeah, I don't really even know, man. It's just like a little fucky. It just seems like really, honestly, a little bit fucky. So it's just kind of really fucking bad on everybody except Chisa, and it's not even, like, amazing on Chisa. That would be the most accurate way for me to describe this one. It's like a nice luxury weapon for her and her teams, but not having it is not a big deal, and it's usable on nobody else. That's a bit of a tough sell. And I'd be entertained to hear in the comments if I'm actually wrong about this and if there are other options. But yeah, having 90% of this weapon's effect tied to stacking up a shit ton of debuffs and then, well, having other teammates on the team that can interact with debuffs too, that's gonna be a little bit rough when there's not a lot of debuff characters in the game. However, I'll use the same argument that I used for Chuyan's weapon. This could be a weapon that actually scales very well as the lifetime of the game goes on. However, that means you can also just pull it when there are more negative status characters in the first place. Maybe there will be another negative status Broadblade in the future that will allow you to equip this thing and then buff everybody on the team. But as of right now, I can't really say that pulling this makes a ton of sense. Unless you really, really like Chisa and really, really like her teams. So with that conversation in mind, why don't we go ahead and start talking about some of the alternatives that are going to exist on the roster? And this one is going to be pretty easy because there's, frankly, a fuck ton. So let's talk about all the weapons that you can decide to use instead of Chisa's signature. And the first one is naturally going to be Lustrous Razor. Because yes, ladies and gentlemen, this weapon essentially is Chisa's signature just without the other component. What this does is it gives you an ER, an attack main stat, as well as attack. And then whenever a resonance skill is cast, your resonance liberation damage bonus is increased by 7%, up to 3 times. It almost reads exactly like her signature, but it has a different activation condition. And the great news about Chisa's kit is that, well, she actually has, and you'll be surprised by this one, or maybe you won't be, she's actually got multiple resonance skill casts, yeah. She actually has a regular one where she marks the targets and applies Havoc Bane to them. And then she has a second one, which is utilized to enter Chainsaw mode, where she deals the majority of her damage. So, because this is built off of repeated resonance skill casts, Chisa at minimum should be able to get at least 2 out of the 3 stacks. She's also got even like a built-in reset mechanic on her resonance skill where like when an enemy dies, I think like over here, yeah, when like an enemy dies, her resonance skill is reset. So you can even decide to do that as well. And when it comes to Chisa's damage profile, pretty much all of her attacks are considered like liberation damage. You can see that over here, liberation damage. Oh, we got more liberation damage. Oh, here's some more liberation damage on top of that. I would assume that Lustrous Razor is going to be a decent pick on her. Because like I said, we get at minimum 2 out of the 3 stacks. We might even be able to go up to 3 if we're feeling a little bit creative with it, right? And yeah, that should give you the damage bonus that you need. And the great bonus on top of that is that you get ER, ladies and gentlemen. You get ER, and that's going to make her substats even easier to balance. Chisa looks like a character that's going to need 130%, maybe even more. Maybe she'll need 140. And this will only make reaching those ER targets a lot easier. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at some other weapons that are in the game. And unfortunately, if you're not using the standard 5-star, you might have a little bit of a situation. Let's start off with the signatures first. So, I don't really think Augusta's weapon is going to do anything for you because it's heavy attack, but if you want like a stat stick, maybe. I don't think Verdant Summit's going to do that much either because it's heavy attack. I don't think this one's... These are all just stat sticks because they contribute parts of the damage portfolio that Chisa does not need. However, she does have another weapon that, frankly enough, should actually seem sort of usable, and that's going to be Lupa's. This one is actually going to give her the same damage bonus as her actual weapon, and I guess technically, when the Fusion Burst team comes out, I'm gonna be real with you over here, man. Maybe this shit's gonna be broken. Where is it? Yeah, when the Fusion Burst team comes out, maybe you want to use Lupa's signature on Chisa. That'd be kind of crazy because, yeah, it's basically the same as Chisa's, but instead of giving a 24% all attribute, it only gives fusion damage. So it's low-key, design-wise, almost exactly the same. It just has, like, different stats. So that's just something to keep in mind. Next weapon that we'll be talking about now is some 4-star ones. So yeah, I would recommend this one if you want the best limited 5-star. When it comes to 4 stars, this one ain't it, Chief. This is the Augusta BP Pass weapon. It's not really that good. It's got some issues with it because it gives heavy attack damage bonus, and she doesn't want that. This weapon, on the other hand, Meditations on Mercy. Well, this one gets a little bit interesting because it's a craftable weapon, and so it's very easy for you to get it to R5. It kind of looks like shit, though, but hey, it's a craftable 4-star weapon. And at max rank, because it's easy to get it to max rank, guys, it'll give you an 8% attack bonus if you deal damage to enemies with negative statuses. And like Chisa's, that's like 90% of like Chisa's thing. She deals damage to enemies with negative statuses on them. And that'll stack up to 4 times. It also has a pretty high base attack of 462. Keep in mind that her weapon is only 40 base attack above this. And this maxed out weapon over here is going to be 38 base attack less, and then give you up to 32% attack on top of an attack main stat. So, yeah, I think this is going to be her best free-to-play option, aside from Lustrous Razor. But Lustrous Razor is already really easy to access for free-to-play, so you might just want to get that. But do keep in mind that this will be something you could use, too. All this other stuff, it's okay. Yeah, this is dog shit. Do not go for this. Dog shit, dog shit, dog shit, dog. Just... basically, everything's dog shit in the 4 stars, except for Meditations on Mercy. This one is super easy to get because it's a craftable weapon. So it would be like, this is my order. This is the number 1 replacement. This is number 2. This is a side grade to her signature. That's better than Lustrous Razor. So this is really number 1. This is number 2. This is number 3. But you should just be going for number 2 because number 2 is the most easily accessible out of all of them here. So you really shouldn't have any issues at all getting this. But if you really do, you have no standard pulls for some godforsaken reason, then you can just craft Meditations on Mercy and you'll probably be just fine. And that's just really what it is. Her weapon options are some of the most free-to-play friendly in the game. And do keep in mind that as long as you're comfortable with losing a 24% 3 substat rolls on your negative status teams, then you really lose nothing at all by using a more free-to-play weapon option on her. But if you really feel the need, like, oh man, my Chisa's gonna be unfucking playable unless I get these 3 substat rolls for free, then go for it. Otherwise, I really think she might have one of the worst signatures in the game value-wise. Because once again, it only works on her, it only works on negative status teammates, and there are like 3 teams in the game you can build with Chisa. Imagine that Shorekeeper's Chisa. You have this team, which is Phoebe. Then you have this team, where she replaces Rover. And then you're going to have as the final team, and remember, Shorekeeper is going to be Chisa. You have this team. There's 3 teams in the game that she works with. I'm not going to go ahead and say that's a crazy large amount. It's kind of really, really constrained right now. And so, maybe you just wait for the Chisa rerun to get her weapon. You pull the character, then you slaughter on some free-to-play stuff, and then you get her weapon later when more negative status teams are out, and she's higher value as a support. But right now, currently, I can't really say that this is like a must-pull scenario, because I think she's going to do just fine with the way more affordable weapon options that we've already shown, and it's not like this thing is like dramatically changing anything. It's 3 substat rolls on your negative status DPS. That's cool, but it's not necessary at all. But yeah, I think that has summed up what I'll say on the value side. Now let's wrap this one up. Essential materials, you're just going to use the regular Broadblade shit. Yeah, there's nothing too crazy to talk about over here. Kudos to Kuro for keeping it simple when it comes to upgrading weapons. They're kind of just like an afterthought at this point, but I'd prefer it be that way than an actual chore for us to take care of. But yeah, to get my final takes on this weapon, I've kind of already been leading up to it. I don't think this is a must-pull at all. I think you pull this weapon if you really want to be prepared for every single new negative status team that pops up in the future. I would pull this weapon if these mechanics are something that really call out to you, and this is something that you're really excited for. And if that's the case, go for it. But also do remember that when it comes to Wuwa's banner schedule, characters that work together are typically always going to run at the same time. And my take is that knowing that Phoebe is the next character on banner right after Zani, and then we're also having Frolova and Cantarella after the release of Chu Yan, what's probably going to occur is that you can just wait until the next character comes out that does Fusion Burst or Glacio Shape or Electro Flare, and then Chisa will probably run a patch or two after that, or even in the same patch. That's just how it's going to be. You can just wait until the next character that does any of these comes out, and then Chisa will probably be right next to them. Much like how Phoebe's right next to Zani, Frolova's right next to Chu Yan, and Cantarella's right next to Frolova. You could probably just wait. I think she's going to rerun very soon because she is the shorekeeper of negative statuses. So I would say just delay it for now. Don't go too deep. But if you really want the best performance possible for your Chisa teams, your negative status teams, go for it. But yeah, I'm not going to be the one to convince you one way or another. This is a pure luxury pull and not anything close to a must pull. That'll be that for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you all thought. Peace.